Before I introduce Dutch, just a couple of guidelines. If you could, please make sure you're on mute if you are not directly communicating, as those of us with auditory processing challenges would appreciate that. Also, if you're not on mute and you make any noise at all, the screen switches to your face. So it's very helpful in terms of distraction if you could make sure you're on mute. Appreciate that. As always, this is an Autistic Voices First space. So if you do not identify as autistic, you are most welcome, but please sit back and listen and hopefully learn from this generous group. We're always warm and supportive, and we will continue that tradition today, making sure we take care of each other and ourselves. And also, as always, if anything presented or that comes up you find upsetting, don't hesitate to sit out. If you want to leave, you can leave at any time, come back at any time. This is a very supportive atmosphere. We want people to be well and take care of themselves. So with that, I'm excited to welcome Dutch back to talk more about the PB&J ethic. It's already making me hungry. We've been going through Dutch's slides, and we had the fun idea to have a virtual potluck one of these days. So put a pin in that. Okay, so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dutch.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate everything, Don. And happy to see some familiar faces in the crowd, and this is good stuff. So yeah, this is the second go around to present this information. And this really is for me kind of a culmination of a lot of work. And so it is, and it's a labor of personal love for me. So this is without further ado, the PB&J neuroaffirming framework. This is my professional headshot, and I always utilize this as kind of a way to when I'm speaking with the neurotypical crowds, because I present. Oh, you got to get the slide going there. There we go. I present the actual photo of me when you ask me to smile, and you'll see it goes all the way back to kindergarten graduation. That awkward executive functioning when you say smile, my brain says smile. What do they mean smile? And it processes about 500 things while my face is going. And for a long time, because of the world I grew up in and the space we all have occupied, I thought that was a choice. I thought I was the guy who made the funny faces. I was the guy who I didn't know why, but I was told you're the guy who ruins pictures. And I'm like, okay, I'm the guy who ruins pictures. And now I can take a photo because I know how to smile. I practiced in the mirror, just like my with my daughter. I am late diagnosed, as a lot of us are, after what, 7. And autistic ADHD. I am a professor of humanities. I got there through a long, winding road of teaching writing and political science and religion and a lot of things, but I teach humanities, and that is my kind of passion because I have been studying humans my whole life, and as a lot of us have. After kind of identification and disclosure, I had some professional hiccups, so to speak. Basically, after functioning for 2 decades in academia and then identifying and disclosing, it was a completely different experience. Grants kind of micromanaged all kinds of weird stuff. And so I stepped away because I could from some of those roles and focused on what I wanted to focus on, which was design work, self-advocacy work, and all of the things that I'm doing now. And so all of this works towards, again, the goals of Mr. Rogers. I always say it's the rule of Fred's, Fred Hampton and Fred Rogers. They really were about building tables where everybody was welcome. And so that is my jam. And pun intended, because I have worked on this PB&J concept out of my humanities work. Food is one of those things. that brings us all together. And when you think about making connection, tables are one of those places that we can make connections. So that's always been my kind of personal interest and focus. Obviously, we know the world is a weird place and not built for all of us. A lot of us in this room know this. The main reason why I kept this slide up is basically because, from my perspective, it's a mismatch, not a deficit. I think a lot of framing either comes from the individual perspective, it's a problem with us, or I've seen a lot of my colleagues and friends project it out into the world. It's only a problem of the world. And I think it's a lot of times it's a mismatch between the two. Again, not putting any onus on us. But you know, the world is what we accept sometimes. And we know that a lot of us, myself included, accepted that this was my smile, right? And I know better now. And I think a lot of us in this room do as well. So the platypus is my favorite animal for that exact reason. The animal that got me in detention more than any other animal, because in science class he was the exception. And you know, there was no dumb question until you ask the 1,000th question of clarification that seems like a threat to someone's authority, or seems like a threat to someone's you know, again, in the neurotypical sense. I always say now that if I ask a question and somebody responds with their resume, I need to reframe the question, right? They are misinterpreting the question, but I can work to reframe it. And so when we think about neuroaffirmation, and this is again preaching to the choir, a lot of people in here, we're not talking about fixing. We're not talking about compliance. And we hear this a lot. It's an act of will. It's an act of choice. And I really, again, the theory of two Freds come from that idea of understanding and supporting. And so it's not a question of why can't we do something or why can't they do something, but what might help us achieve going to the grocery store, what might help us achieve the executive functioning to make it through the semester without having 400 papers to grade the last week of the semester. Those kinds of things, which I just thought were the way in which business was done, but have learned that there are other ways that I can help my brain function, right? And so it really does require somewhat of a framework reshift. If you grew up in the 1900s, as my kid says, you've got to rethink this idea of laziness, this idea of disengagement, this idea of overreaction, right? Thinking about overwhelm, shutdown, and sensory responses. And I think that that's, if there's one thing that I know when I go out and do my work in the corporate world, speaking to banks or, you know, doing employee training and things like that, that's the only thing that I want people to walk away with, is understanding that if they can just take the typical situation that they've always had and step back once and refocus, maybe they'll see it differently. And that comes from having a autistic father who was an engineer who would literally sometimes take my math homework and flip the page over and say, now look at this geometry problem. Can you figure it out now? And there were times that it made no sense to me, and there were times that I could see it. When you physically turn it upside down, I could see it. And that metaphor expanded throughout my life, to where there are times even now where, again, our unmasking and self-care exploration, I hang upside down on the couch just like I did when I was a kid, because I realized my brain was doing that for a reason. So my wife and kid know now, if daddy's up on the couch and his feet are upside down and his head's there, they may need to help his old body get out of that situation, but that situation is a choice at the moment. And again, it's kind of embracing the things that work for us without shame and fear, which is hard, which is very hard. And so this is my reframe of universal design. I have gone out and gotten grants. I have had money to feed students, money to knock down walls, which in the 21st century, the early part of the 21st century, was very hard to get. I was able to do that, but I still couldn't get administrators and people that controlled the money to get paid to the students how that worked. And every time you would talk about best practices in universal design, eyes would gloss over with the idea of infinite cost and invoices that never ended. And part of my work was in, reframing, storytelling, public relations. And I said, there's got to be a way that we can sell this. Because if you've worked in education for more than a decade, you have seen the same theory come through the classroom twice with different names. They just repackage differentiated instruction and sell it back to you as a new product, right? And so I thought, let's do the same thing with universal design. And so I came up with the idea of micro accommodations, micro loans, micro everything. And this is not my idea when it comes to universal design for learning, but it was the idea of an Australian lawyer when it came to the idea of gender inclusion in the workplace. And it made sense. It's not about big changes. It's not about policy. It's not about forcing people's hands. It's about everyday interactions, which then change exponential outcomes, right? It's trusting the math. Okay. So when you look at the idea of micro accommodations, it really is just a repackaging of universal design. And like I say, it's impossible. And this was one of the things I know when I talked about universal design to even some of the older architects, because I work for a state school. So when we get people who bid and work, we do not always get the best of the best. We may get somebody who's 40 years in the business and has the state contracts, right? Because when I discussed the idea that I needed soundproofing, I had the contractor come in and say, you're going to have negative sound in this room. This is going to be sickening to some people. And I said, what are you talking about? And he says, you've got like $14,000 in soundproofing on these walls. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. And he says, I can scale some of that back and we can use that in other places. And I said, wholeheartedly. But it was the idea that it was an overcorrection, right? Which again, if you've worked in public education like I have, you know about the overcorrection. And so understanding universal design, they either shut down completely. And again, this was with money in hand. This was with money in hand for private, grants and foundations. They couldn't get over that framework shift. It was either all or nothing. And we're supposed to be the ones with the binary thinking issues, right? The autistic community is supposed to be the one that thinks all or nothing. But yet I have seen that it's usually my dealing with the world that is that kind of dichotomous, really fallacy, right? So micro accommodations are what I kind of tweaked for our purposes of universal design, because a lot of people think about ramps and they think about signage, and again, having dealt with the builders, the architects, the administrators in various projects, they think about compliance. We're ADA compliant. We're ADA compliant. And I was like, yeah, but I want to be accessible. But we're compliant. But that's not accessible. That's not welcoming. Just because the door is unlocked doesn't mean that the room on the other side is one that I want to turn the handle and walk into, right? And so it really is about connection. It's about bringing humanity back, because if you study also the history of disability, you'll get into the theory and the discussion of disability as a social concept didn't exist. Yes, disability as a physical, existence for an individual existed, but the social concept of a deficit, right? The social concept of being other than, depending on culture, time, and place, really is either there or not, right? And so micro accommodations were also based on some of the anthropological and historical research, that we know that people who maybe had lost a limb in war or battle served other purposes, right? People who were born without sight might have a special purpose in some cultures, right? And actually have a training in the histories and the songs, and actually so I was interested in the fact that this seemed to be a human constant, that this connection was needed. Thinking about, again, the Dalai Lama talking about the fact that humans are one of the only mammals that are weak for 2 years and need to connect with other humans in order to survive. If we could walk at the end of the first day, we may not have the capacity for the empathy that we do. But that empathy always comes with a cost in the modern world. So I looked at low cost, no cost ways in which we can show that empathy. And just a small example are these two stickers. I use these as stickers. We've got them as postcards and stuff. The one on the left is again, just a basic communication aid that my daughter's ASD class came up with. I was talking about kind of an interesting graphic or image or something that I could do. I said, people always are doing stickers and always doing swag, and I don't want to do, again, I'm an Alton Brown fan. I don't want a unitasker. I don't want just something that's only going to give my name. I want it to serve a purpose. It needs to actually have a purpose. And so this non-speaking communication aid was that purpose. And when I go to speak at elementary schools, I know I'll put one of these on my arm of my hoodie, and students will utilize that to communicate, again. And I've seen the faces of students who know now they can communicate, right? Even if they choose not to, the option is there. And my wife and I kind of came up with this one on the right, which was a way that she's a high school teacher, and ways in which students could communicate with her non-verbally about their levels of understanding. Because when you are a 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade English student, and you have that social pressure, and you forget what a conjunction is, it's hard to raise your hand and say, excuse me, Mrs. Hazlett, what's a conjunction? And then hear the jokes and the jabs and things. And all the student has to do is lay their pen or their highlighter or turn something towards the number of understanding. And my wife can walk over and say, a conjunction is a word, she can, just by where their pen is, know to engage this student with maybe further explanation of the topic. Maybe make it look as if the teacher is imposing in that situation the student to engage. And it does create that little bit of connection and allow at times, because I've had teachers utilize this in some Oxford public schools here in Michigan, and in some of the Washtenaw County schools. And they've talked about the ease in which students communicate and the ease in which the teacher then knows immediately, without saying how many people understand this, which again is a social vote and has that pressure. They can walk around the classroom and immediately know how many students understand and how many don't, right? And think about this from those of us who are in higher ed, there are no clickers. If you remember the days of the clickers when we used to do clicker and it was like all the new technology and you could take polls in classes with clickers. This is old school clicker technology with a pencil and a piece of paper. And again, you can laminate these, put them on desks, all kinds of stuff. So again, low cost, no cost. But it also needed to be framework, because just putting things in people's hands, when you think about an anthropological, sociological perspective, the lesson needs to be reinforced. The lesson has to be reinforced. And if it is reinforced with complicated ideas, if it's reinforced, it will be jettisoned, because if your brain is like mine, rules that have exceptions are no longer rules. Therefore, the whole system kind of seems suspect. And if you tell me take step 1 to step 2 to step 3, step 3 to step 4, and I find that those steps don't work in my particular situation, I'm now, everything you say is kind of suspect. My fight or flight kicks in. And I was interested in the way in which faith, religion, or kind of social belief works to reinforce itself. And I thought for it to truly be a system, it has to be a framework, and it needs to be reciprocal. It has to feed into itself. So the PB&J, predictability, balance, and joy framework kind of came out of that. And it also came out of that simple idea that PB&J sandwich that someone else makes for you tastes better. There is magic there. What the magic is, I don't know. Grandma said it was love, right? But it could be the same. I can make one. I can hand you the exact same bread, peanut butter and jelly, and knife. You can make the same one, hand it to me, and I can tell which one you made because it tastes better, right? And so, and as a parent as a son of an autistic parent, and the parent of an autistic child, I also know that there are times I needed help and I needed a touchstone to remind myself to be patient or to, remember that behavior was communication or something like this. And I always been making the lunches. So I thought, well, crap, if I'm making the sandwich in and of itself, that is a reinforcement of the lesson. Right. And so every time I make, eat, or see PB&J now, I often think, okay, a little predictability, a little balance, and some joy. Because the idea is it's it's a cycle. When you don't have the one, when predictability goes out the window, you focus on the other two. When there is no balance, look towards predictability, look towards joy. When there is no joy, find some balance in the predictability, right? And so this idea that you basically can ping pong around these three, and both in caring for others as a teacher or as a parent, but also caring for ourselves as an autistic or neurodivergent individual, we need to have that flexibility. We need to have and understand that it's not always going to follow the schedule. And we know this, but we hope that it doesn't happen. Not today. Oh, Lord, not today. Right. And so when we're thinking about from a teacher perspective or a parent perspective or building a system perspective, predictability shows respect. Balance shows care, and joy shows connection. But beyond that, it's also that connection to ourselves. It's that care to ourselves, and it's that respect for ourselves. Because I know playing video games till 2 o'clock in the morning might make me feel good, but it is not respectful to my brain and what I hope to accomplish maybe the next day. And I know that may sound like some crazy 20th century boomer stuff, but I have to understand that even though the candy is good, that my brain can't run on that candy, right? Good brain food. There is time for that candy. But that's where the joy comes. But there's also time that I need to balance that out, right? And again, as I talk about this, please remember this all comes from my studies in humanity. And so I'm really looking at this from that human perspective, and then looking towards and tweaking as we go, the way in which the theories work and don't, which is part of the reason why I like to come into spaces like this with people like you. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Here we go. All right. So what is P? P is predictability. And what this is not the idea of rigidity, because I know that I get locked in a personal sense into the comfortability of that pattern. And I expect that here's Monday. Monday, I get up, I do this. Tuesday, I get up, I do this. Wednesday is class day. Thursday is office hours, except when it isn't. Except when I've got the dentist appointment this week, or it's finals week, or it's spring break or something. And yes, I know that is coming, but my body doesn't. My nervous system doesn't. It doesn't always recognize when that happens. And so having some places for pausing and processing and participating, in our spaces, in our environments, our homes, and our classrooms, right? It will allow the perception of safety to exist, because I don't know about you, but my nervous system, it's not about if the danger is real or not. It's about if it perceives danger or not. Because I walk through Target and sometimes I feel like I'm being stalked by a tiger, and I know there can't be a tiger in the Target, right? I hope there's not a tiger in the Target, but my brain is going to run. And at that moment, that's where I have to override. And this, I'm thinking about my own therapist. She says, be smarter than your brain. And I said, that's impossible. But you can be, right? And this is why I practice the kind of laws of P's, right? The 4 P's, the idea of patience, pause, predictability, and paradigm, because the first thing that we have to do is shift our own perception, right, of how the behavior is happening, our own behavior as well, right? If we're feeling nervous in a situation, if we're at the Target and we feel that need to drop the cart and run, we need to, in that moment, pause, right? Take time the patients to analyze the situation, right? And then proceed from there. We can do things like using simple routines. You can allow that time to process, but it really is that last one. It's that paradigm. It's it's the shame, it's the guilt, it's the judgment, and probably more so when it comes inward, right? I mean, I know I am more forgiving of other people's tardiness than am my own. I am more forgiving of other people's mistakes sometimes than I am my own. As long as it's not a social rule. You break a social rule, I have a special place for you. But I am also learning to deal with that, right? Because that is where my need for that predictability, right? The customer service interaction, the everyday customer service interaction that you don't get because I teach and work in Metro Detroit. So the social interactions can be anything this today, right? And so the predictability when it comes to those interactions is not there, which is why, even though we might be able to live on peanut butter alone, and some of us in college did, just a spoonful a day, possibly, it is the conveyance, it's the balance, it's the bread, which will help. Because when those things go wrong, as they will, Murphy's Law, understanding that there is a balance and understanding that we align our expectations with human capacity, as opposed to, because I cannot control when finals week is. I cannot control when, especially here in Michigan, when the snow day disrupts my instructional schedule, which then disrupts my parental schedule, which then disrupts my home schedule, all of those other things. Because I'm married to a teacher, I am a teacher, and we have a student in the house. So when there's a snowstorm, there are 3 people in the house that were not expecting to be in the house that day. And we're all neurodivergent, and none of us want to deal with each other, right? And so the idea of offering some flexible pacing, right? And the idea of normalizing, especially, and again, you'll notice framework comes back in all 3 of these, normalizing the idea of resets, normalizing the idea of pauses. Because if you grew up in the 1900s like me, and this is something that I didn't think about until I was speaking with my students, how many of you, if you heard your parents call your name when you were a child, were expected a certain response and know what that response is? Coming. You were to acknowledge, you were to process, and you were to move, whether you wanted to or not, right? And so I know, and I remember the moment when I was sitting on a couch with my buddy who became like the Zen Buddha master for me in this moment, because the phone rang and I jumped and his phone rang again. And I looked at him like, what are you doing? Why aren't you answering? I mean, again, this was 1999, right? And the phone rang a third time and I'm like, dude. And he just calmly turned to me and said, I am not a slave to that thing. And then turned back to the TV. And I was like, we can do that? That's a possibility? Wait, huh? Because the idea had never crossed my mind that coming was not the response to everyone else's expectation. And so that balance is, again, not just for the situations that we find ourselves in, but the situations we put ourselves in, even if it's just emotionally. And so in environments, those can be things like bonds, shared agreements, in homes, in classrooms, and workplaces, and if you're a teacher and you have utilized, like syllabus agreements or things like that, classroom agreements, you'll know that the rules get followed a lot differently, and I might say even in a more positive sense when the class has ownership over it, right? It's less about punishment and more about really about just expectation, right? I mean, it's that old, I'm not mad at you, I'm disappointed thing. And for some odd reason that works when it's peers, when it's the people that we want to be around, right? building in the idea of breaks, but and again, you'll notice lots of pauses, lots of breaks, lots of frameworks, because this is where, again, when you can't catch the one part of PB&J, you got to catch the other. Again, you can use the spoon for the peanut butter. You can just have a bread sandwich tonight. We'll get to you gluttons who just spoonful jam into your mouth. Um, but right now, again, it's the idea of balance, right? The two slices of bread, which then also form a boundary on that sandwich. And this is something that Cumming taught us not to do. Set boundaries and keep boundaries. And that is probably one of the hardest things to do. I know when I started implementing self-care, unmasking, all of these other things, holding on to other people's understanding of what my boundaries meant to them, and thinking, oh, I'm horrible for setting that boundary. I have done this for 20 years. I should just continue to do this. Right. But that is not respecting myself. That doesn't go back to that predictability thing. And so when I started actually implementing and teaching this, I thought, crap, I have to follow it. And so I started to follow it 3 years ago. And my, my understanding has gotten better as well. And then also barrier removal. Understanding that we can both remove barriers for others, but also explain clearly, I need clearer instructions. I mean, for me, I know when I first started to get asked what accommodations, might you need, I had no language for it. My language was suck it up. My language was I'm fine, even when I'm not. That was the response to are you okay after coming was I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Right. I remember my 6-year-old daughter expressing to me that her teacher said, when you apologize in our class, my teacher won't let you say it's okay. She makes you engage, right? The apology, because when my daughter apologized to me and I said, it's okay. She said, no, Daddy, it's not okay. I hurt you. And I was like, what's a 6-year-old? Like, the emotional intelligence. So again, it's just the ability to name. It's the ability to understand that these are feelings, these are barriers. And once we name them, almost like, that movie Labyrinth, it ceases to have a little bit of power, right? David Bowie fades a little bit into the distance. No Labyrinth fans. Okay. And then finally, the last one is, joy. And if you, again, college struggling, peanut butter sandwiches you can live on, but the jelly, that is the special part. That's the sweet part. That's the good stuff. And that's also where the boring PB and J can be you, because you can have the little, little travel jellies that you get from the hotel, and you could have a nice little spread of some black currant, some strawberry, some mint, maybe some, all these different kinds of jellies, orange marmalade, and make the sandwich your own just by putting on the jelly, which is the reason why I talk about the variety, though, is because joy never comes in the same flavor for people, right? And the last thing we want to do is yuck someone's yum, and especially our neurodivergent joy, which for some of us, we have yet to define. We don't know what our joys are, because like the smiling face of the camera, we've been told to like things. We've been told that we like things. We've been told, oh, the way that you act when you're doing this is good for me, therefore you must like it. Like when I played football, everyone was like, man, you're so, yeah, I was regulated. I was very regulated, but it was not something that I wanted to do. It was something, I mean, it felt good, right? I mean, like the regulation felt good, but man, I didn't like all the social aspect of it. It was very hard socially to navigate a locker room when you're not like everyone else in that locker room. And I enjoyed the field stuff, but it was everything else, which was a majority of football, was everything else other than the field. And so when I had to find for me what that happiness meant. And so this is, again, something as simple, and I am a big fan of honoring small things, right? Being present in the moment and praising even the things that we take for granted that we do correctly, right? And I know that because I've started to do this, my family also reflects back to me, and there are times where they'll say, Dad, you did a really good job today, when everything went wrong at robotics practice and it was really loud. Like, I saw you struggling a little bit, but good job. And I'm thinking, man, again, I assume my teenager isn't paying attention to me at all, ever, period. But to even have that validation as a parent, right? Not just as an individual to know, hey, I'm doing good with my own therapeutic journey. But as a parent to know in that moment, crap, because my kid wasn't paying attention to what I say, she was paying attention to what I did. Which again, as parents, we know. Which is why in those moments, we also have to allow for that authenticity, creating that space where people can be themselves, as messy, sticky, and jelly-like as it is. We have to allow them to be themselves. So, what are the J's that refer to our jelly? Well, things like presence, joining in, being fully present in the moment, and putting distractions aside. And I think about times when I have seen parents sit down on the floor of a grocery store aisle with their dysregulated child, and damn everyone else, I'm here in this moment for you. I've seen my wife do that for me in moments of dysregulation. And that to me is one of the most powerful things, because they weren't trying to, as I often had the compulsion to do as a parent, get my child out of the store. Everyone else is having a bad time. I have to remove myself. No, I should have been there for her in that moment, right? And so being present in that moment, right? Because some of these things were not learned from good things; they were learned from bad things. Uh, Reflecting on the journey, again, praising small things, letting progress be visible, right? But allowing for growth, because often when we start to change as an individual, we will punish ourselves and will punish other people because of who they used to be, what they used to do. I am the weird smiling fat guy who tells jokes, right? And if I buy into that identity, I always will be the weird smiling fat guy. And I say that because I was twice the size I was. Before I, went on my therapeutic journey, I was 500 pounds. And it was because of oral, stimming, and it was because of maladaptive kind of coping techniques, right? I hid in that stimming, and it was no good for me. I wasn't in that moment existing, right? As a lot of us don't, because of the trauma of existing in the world that we exist. Allowing people to just be, including yourself, to just be. I know the power of knowing, just because no one else is doing it, you are not the only one who has to grab that slack. Because I know a lot of us in this room feel that pull. When you see the rope falling off of sliding off the deck, you think no one else is going to grab it. I got to grab onto it, even knowing that if you grab onto it, it's going to drag you down with it. But you think no one else has got to do it. I got to do it. I think that's part of the reason why we evolutionarily survived. The neurodivergent folks, they need us on the outskirts of town to ring the bells. But we need to understand, right, that big or small, being authentic is in and of itself not only that kind of connection to our joy, but it's ways in which we can connect joy to others, which in this world we need more of, because it does become contagious. You walk around frowning, you walk around smiling. And I thought my mom was crazy when she used to say that, but I've seen the research. You can do that even in the zoo with bonobos, right? I've seen the research. So, joy gives us meaning. It gives us connection. And for me, it's that old, apocryphal Churchill story. It's the whole reason we're fighting, right? It's the whole reason that we're fighting. So finally, just to kind of sum it all up, I always say you can't always help someone when they're kind of in meltdown or in dysregulation, but you can make them a snack. predictability, balance, and joy, right? You can create a little safety. You can provide a little bit of capacity and a whole lot of connection, right? Because it's not about fixing the world or fixing us. It's about making it a little bit more human while we're here. And what that human is, we get to define, right? No one else gets to define that in that moment. If we're following those kind of paths of being present and being in that connective moment, no one gets to define that, because I have seen people who don't speak the same language communicate in real time. I have seen people across universes, on the internet without language communicate in real time. It's powerful, it's magical, but it's real. And so I think we can tap into that as well. All right. It's you'll never hear me speak of superpower except for the magic that we collectively create as humans. When we say this word means this, and then we're all like, okay, that to me is our collective magical superpower. And so then I have a spot for any questions and a big fat PB&J sandwich on that slide, which again is making me hungry too. So yes, questions.
Hey, that was great, Dutch. I'm so glad you got to come back and share this. I actually do this kind of naturally, just like there's 5 things I do pretty much every day. I know they're good for me, and so I make sure I do them. In what order and when is up to me, and it comes down to that joy thing. Like, when is it going to bring me the most joy and comfort to do it? So I feel very privileged to be able to structure my life that way. I'm wondering, you know, how we address this on a systemic level, because foundationally this is not the norm. And so you've been brilliant at, how you do this in your personal life. But if you have any strategies around bringing that to a systemic level, could you talk a little more about that?
Well, and I think that I mean, honestly, one of the big ways, or one of the big things that people talk about, right, is scalability. When you're talking about this, they want to know about the metrics. Yeah. But on a systemic or a systematic level, when I've seen it. I'm thinking about something as simple as the jar of mints that used to be sitting out on the table at the bank or in the customer service, right? And we know what sour and mint does in the nervous system, in the brain, and the way in which it. So I'm thinking that on a systemic level, they're small. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't. I, I'm trying to think about the ways in which they other than the little jars of candy, which I'm sitting here thinking about how silly this sounds. But when I'm in a room full of bankers, they were like, oh my God. And now Lake Michigan Credit Union is bringing back like the mints, right? Because they were like, oh my gosh, there might be some truth in that. We may have had less customer service, but I know when I was at Marriott, and it was one of the things that kind of spurred this kind of idea of micro accommodation was the way in which they utilized because they were having problems with their uh, Yelp reviews, all the internet reviews. They were near the Cleveland airport, near the train track, and it was noise, something they couldn't control, something that bugged the guests. And so what they did is they put out a sign that said earplugs available upon request. And the horrible reviews continued. They put out a jar and they said, please take one, whether you want to use it or not. We are near an airport. They have this whole sign. I've got a picture of it somewhere in my lecture notes. But I called the manager out and I said, what's this? And what, this is brilliant. And I can't believe, and, because I have sensory and she said, it just decided to make it available to everyone. The people who needed it wouldn't ask, right? And the people who asked, sometimes didn't need it, but it did. It was universal design in action, right? And so on a systemic level, when you look at, all you have to do is, for me, show them the data on universal design and make that connection. The problem is once you make that connection, I mean, again, if you know, you bring best practices, you bring all the data, and they'll still say no. But it's in the data of universal design. So you just extrapolate it into the micro, and you say, okay, well, earplugs are universal design. An 18-inch sign off of the base of the floor, even though it's not ADA compliant, is universal design, right? It's yeah, it is. It's really hard to explain to larger scale until you can humanize that moment. But I'm good. But I'm working on it. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Getting enough rooms where we can get, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All power to you for sure. Are you comfortable looking for people's hands that have questions, and I'll monitor the chat?
Yes,
And
yes.
if anybody wants me to bring up a question or comment, if you could just write the word read before your comment in the chat, I'll make sure that that gets brought up. Okay, good.
Okay. So, has a question?
Well, it wasn't necessarily a question. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm
That go out for anybody else? Uh, hello?
Yeah,
Yeah, your audio
readily.
went out. Oh, your audio went out. Maybe she got a call right at the moment.
probably. I heard her say she wanted to say thank you, and then
and it just cut out.
Yeah.
It's a mystery.
If you want to write your comment or question in the chat, I guess it was a comment. I can read that out loud for you if you're having some audio problems.
But yeah, no, I really, when you looked at the universal design issue, everyone kept telling us universal design the class, use it, use it, use it. And so when I started to implement it and use it, that's when I started getting pushback on utilizing it. And I was like, this is weird. Like I wouldn't have been even, this wouldn't have been on my radar had you not told me it was best practice. And then I really lean into best practice and you were like, that's a bridge too far. But you know, it's measurable. I mean, but I have had the question and the look on my face probably, you know, when they asked the question was probably answered it for them, but they said, well, can you show us the data on where feeding people has a correlation with better grades? And I'm like, what are we doing this at at a post-secondary school? We're going to ask that question. Okay, well, I guess I'll go to the journals. Like, huh? So, but honestly, that was one of the questions I got at one time, and push back on offering universal menstrual products in bathrooms, regardless of which you know, they were like, why would you do that? And I'm like, why wouldn't you? Like, if we get the money for it and it's private money and I've got the company that are delivering the products, why wouldn't we? They're so that it didn't make any sense to me. It made no sense to me, which is like why I said I had to step away because I could keep fighting that machine, but it will grind us. Go create another machine somewhere.
Do you have, just off the top of your head, some sensory specific examples? You know, you mentioned sound with the earplugs. Are there other ones that come to you that readily?
Yeah, I utilize I mean I am shameless about indoor eyeglassware. I mean, again, having been a child who grew up in the 1900s and who you think you are, Fonzie? Yes, yes, I think I'm Fonzie. At this point, that's what I answer now. You know, but it's I think that you know, when it one, you know, is that, but also, you know, a lot of times the sensory friendly clothing that one wants to wear, right? That takes also some, you know, some public um, courage at moments. because I discovered sensory friendly clothes after I lost a lot of weight, and I was like, I'm never going to wear something that's uncomfortable. Why would I choose to do that now? Like I had to do that for like 30 years of my life. Why would I want to? Um, but a lot of it is literally just changing framework and social norms of what you expect to have, like in maybe that going out to the grocery store or whatever. I mean, I have a hammock in my den that sits between the living room and the kitchen, so that when I'm done, or when I'm sitting and conversing, I can swing and we can talk. Like, and anybody, and you can be in any room and somebody can be in a swing. So if anybody needs to regulate, just go regulate and swing. You can still be part of the situation but not be part of. So and it was $15. It's two holes in the ceiling, but people are like, "Oh my God, why would you hang a swing in your house? Why would you? Why would you?" But it's a social norm. It's the same way that we started putting doors on kitchen cabinets, and now people are like, "Why would you not have doors on your kitchen cabinets?" And it's like, those used to not be a thing, right? Like that was something that we. So the more I studied normal, like in humanities, the less I understood it, because there was no such thing and everything. And so I just started to realize that it really was about getting people to lean into their no normal, lean into their sensory truth, whatever that be, because that's the way humans have existed forever. And usually those people who do those things, like wear the indoor glasses or the headphones, or, are just like unabashedly, like, I'm going to feed my brain what my brain needs in this moment. Those are the people who set the trends anyway. Those are the people who eventually everybody's like, oh, I want to be like Fonzie. Well, Fonzie did that because Fonzie had sensory problems. Like, Fonzie was autistic. No, I'm just kidding. But really, I mean, like, yeah, Grandpa who sat on the swing with the toothpick in his mouth, he got the same haircut every Thursday and ate the same meal every Tuesday. And if Don wasn't there to cut his hair, he didn't. It wasn't good. And Grandma, I mean, yeah, he wasn't autistic, not at all. So yeah,
Yeah, our tribe invents everything.
yeah, yep. And oh, sorry, there was
I
a
have
read,
a
but
read comment. Thank you so much for this. You want me to go ahead?
go ahead, go ahead.
Thank you so much for this. I'm an educator and late identified. So much resonated with me. A lot of the framework includes ways I naturally connect with my students. I'm having a hard time learning to incorporate the same accommodations for myself. Yeah. Also, I'm a huge Labyrinth fan. Me too.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. Got a question or a comment?
Yeah, yeah. So thank you very much. This is a really good presentation. So I work as an executive coach and organizational consultant, and I've had CEOs say things to me like, "It's difficult. I think he's autistic. He says if he works more than 45 hours a week, he really can't perform very well, and I've seen his productivity drop off. Why can't he be like everybody else and put in 70 hours a week?" And I say the other people's performance is falling off too. It's just the one who's doing that. So maybe you should design your company so everybody doesn't have to work 70 hours a week. Similarly, I've had people say things like, well, so and so really needs a very explicit job description and what I expect of them. And, I think he's neurodivergent or something because, other people just seem to deal with the ambiguity. And I have to say, no, everybody would do better if they had a really clear understanding. So, um, moving people from the point of view of we've got to make accommodations for the quote unquote different people to everybody will benefit from this is one of the things that I really preach. And so I appreciate you backstopping the philosophy that I've developed with the folks I work with. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I went to a seminar this weekend and I brought my headphones and my loops for when things got loud, and I asked for some sensory accommodations, and I felt like they were grudgingly accommodating, and they're like, why can't you just wear your headphones when it's loud? And I didn't know how to explain it, that, I mean, at some point I can't handle it even with the headphones. But I felt like they were encouraging me to participate and not leave. What is better words than sensory issues to communicate to stupid people that I need more quiet than regular people?
Wow. Yeah. No, my brain didn't go to good things because I was like, my brain works at a higher capacity than your like it was not, it was running on your stupid comment, and I was definitely not good. Wow.
I'm sorry, I don't
No,
mean to be
do not
judgmental.
apologize for it.
Okay.
No, 100% do not apologize for it.
Because I feel it.
I feel
it in every
core of
like my being.
right. I completely agree.
Um,
I mean, because in those moments, like that's where I just want to be like, it's the law, but I also know nobody cares, and there's no teeth in that law, and right. And shame, nobody has any shame either, so it's not like you can shame. You almost have to trick people. And so sensory, I mean,
The sensory issues doesn't seem to really
No.
go deep for people, and I don't know how to advocate for myself to get more, more, Well, I mean, I accommodate myself. I want them to understand that I'm not, quitting and running away to go back to my hotel room because it's too noisy in the ballroom. Because I mean, I paid my money. I wanted to attend the whole seminar,
right.
but I want to leave before I'm in fetal position, crying on the floor, having a meltdown. And I don't know how much more rubber band I have until it snaps. So I try to avoid things that could end in me curling up in fetal position, sobbing on the floor. I really try to avoid that. So I don't know how to have people understand that I need accommodations, because they make me feel like being weird, being difficult, being a drama queen,
Right.
and I'm not being dramatic. I don't want anybody paying attention to me. I just want to quietly participate as fully as possible.
I mean, I use dysregulation a lot just because, I mean, I know that a lot of people use overwhelm, meltdown, that kind of stuff, but it takes away some of this is my choice that I want, just like as what you were saying.
Do people know what dysregulation means?
No,
Okay.
Absolutely
not. But there, what? You're what now? And then I use it as a moment to say, my nervous system, I'm autistic. I hear things louder than you. I can hear the light. Like, I will use very simple connective kind of description, almost like naming it in a very basic way. Right. And there have been times where I've stopped and said, I need to turn the lights down. And I had somebody go, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I'm like, can you hear them? And they're like, no. And I'm like, good, that I'm turning them down because I can't. Right. And then usually there'll be like one or two people in the room that'll go, because secretly they didn't want to say anything, but they're like, I heard it too. Right. I heard it too. And then you can, and I don't ever point them out unless I know that person. But I have had friends, and I'm like, see, agrees with me. She, and I've got friends who have epilepsy and stuff, and turning down the lights for me helps them as well. And everybody has this collective calm. So it's uncomfortable advocacy, is what I have, which is, again, socially, and some of the most unaccommodative places are conferences. 100% crazy schedules. I mean, we did a conference at University of Michigan, and people were like, oh my gosh, thank you. Because I said every hour, 45-minute session, 15-minute break, 45-minute session, 15-minute break. I was like, no way that we're doing like back to back to back to back conference where everybody has to run around to here to there, because I can't do it. Like it's overwhelming. And so, yeah, conferences are probably the least accommodative of all the academic, things that we do. Unless you ask your own institution for accommodation.
The most least accommodating is my family of origin, actually.
Well, no, yeah, we get it. Oh my God.
But my son, he has autism too, and we hang out in dark rooms all the time. And people are like, "Why don't you have any lights on?" And I just like the dark, so yeah.
Yep. Have a neurodivergent household. it's our normal in this house to have a swing and to have Bluetooth headphone.
If I wasn't in an apartment, I would totally install a swing if I own this place. That swing is a great idea.
Thank you. And
I'll work on that now, and let's communicate, because I would like to figure out better ways to communicate that to people. To maybe work on some scripting, because I actually jotted it down. So I'd love to reach out again.
I'm not good at advocating when I'm already upset.
Yep, no, and me
My
too.
brain
That's why I
shuts
need
off
scripts.
and I'm just in survival mode. I can explain it to computer programmers. I can't explain it to regular people. I'm like, it's like I'm running human.exe in the background and it's just my buffer is full. And I
use scripts
all the time.
I mean, even now.
I write them out for myself so that I am prepared and I have the words, because I don't always have the words, and I have no shame about that. Somebody who's, I've got a master's in literature and I can't find the words. It's okay. Neither could Shakespeare. So he stole words too.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you. Any? I don't see any others.
You can get that crazy gleam. I was just going to tell you can get that crazy gleam in your eye and say, you haven't even seen difficult yet.
I'm at a 6. You should see me at an 11.
I choose chaos.
Yep. Well,
okay, anybody else?
And again, if anybody wants to reach out, humanities101.org, you can find me there. There's like there's a contact form, or there's an email link, all the socials and stuff. It's just a one-page website, so it's just a place where you can find me. So any questions, I want to work on that script, because I was like, oh man, I need better ways of saying that, because when you ask the question about dysregulation, I'm like, no, they don't. But I have explained it to a lot of people. So please reach out if you have questions after the fact. Anyone.
I feel like I give the Autism 101 synopsis several times a month to people.
Right? Well, thank you. There, I dropped it in the chat for everyone.
So I want to thank Dutch so much for swinging by. This was really great. I think you were the last session for a while, but because we're trying to go light this summer, but we've got really exciting things coming for next year. We will have some things this summer, so stay tuned to social media.